welcome to episode 73 of How About the Huskies. I'm Connor, joined by Matt and Andrew. And boy, these types of episodes are getting fun to make. We're doing one every year. It feels like another Final Four preview, our second year of the podcast, our second Final Four preview. The Huskies demolished Illinois in the Elite Eight. We all saw that game. It was a 25-point win. Huskies went on a 30-0 run at one point, late first half, early second half, complete domination of a really solid Illini team that got to the Elite Eight for a reason. It's not like they had a cakewalk there. They weren't a bad team by any means. The Huskies, they were just a lot better. We're not going to really talk about that one in this episode. We're just going to really focus on the Final Four, which I'm sure you all have seen the field, but Alabama will be our matchup in the semifinals on Saturday night. And then should we win, if we win, when we win, whatever you want to call it, we'll take on either Purdue, who is the heavy favorite, or NC State, who's been on a magical run, 9 straight elimination games to get to this point. Really an impressive story going on with NC State. But before we really go into this preview, we're going to talk mostly about Alabama, the matchup between the Huskies and the Crimson Tide. What was your initial reaction to that Final Four field? I mean, obviously we figured UConn would get there. Purdue, even though they've had their struggles, we knew they'd probably get there. But some of these other teams, Alabama, NC State, what was your guys' reaction?
To me, it's not the craziest Final Four I've ever seen. Last year was definitely a little bit crazier to me. Considering Alabama is a 4 seed, I was surprised with that originally. I didn't think that they should be a 4 seed, but they made the 4 seed, whatever. We've seen crazier things. Purdue a 1 seed. It feels a lot crazier than it is simply just because of Purdue's lack of success. Alabama being Alabama. And we have our regular Cinderella and NC State. So we have 2 1s, a 4, and an 11. So it seems crazy, but no, it's definitely not the craziest Final Four I've ever had. But it's definitely a fun Final Four having two powerhouse schools like UConn and Purdue have been great programs over the past couple of years. So hoping to have some good matchups, hoping to eventually meet Purdue in the championship, see Donovan Clingan versus Zach Edey. I feel like that matchup would be a lot of fun, but first we have to get through Alabama, and how about we go through that?
Honestly, Matt just said it perfectly. Obviously, there's us, who is just a powerhouse. There's Purdue. They're in the Final Four. We can stop joking about them. And then there's NC State, who is just the definition of got hot at the right time. And then Alabama's the weird one because they played somebody, a 13, and then they played a 12. And then they beat number 1 UNC. So it was kind of like, is this team legit? And they are. So it's going to be a tough game for us, but I don't think they're just that good just because of how many points they've given up. I mean, they gave up, I think, 89 to Grand Canyon, if that's right, something like that. They've gave up over 85 points in their first 3 games. So it's definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, my initial reaction seeing this Final Four is that the field is very, very similar to 2021, 3 years ago. If you guys remember, that was the Gonzaga, Baylor, Houston, UCLA. You have the two heavyweights, the two favorites in Gonzaga and Baylor, who ended up meeting in that championship game. You have the Houston was a 2 seed, Alabama's a 4 seed. They're both solid programs, but no one's really expecting them to do anything in this Final Four round. Maybe they can, but Houston didn't stand a chance against Baylor that year. And I'm not saying Bama doesn't stand a chance against us, but it kind of gets similar vibes. Then UCLA was an 11 seed in 2021. They were also a Power 5 team that barely stuck into the field and got hot at the right time. So I feel like this is a very similar field, and we all know what happened. Gonzaga, Baylor in the title, undefeated Gonzaga lost to Baylor. And in this situation, we beat Gonzaga. So hopefully that doesn't happen. We don't lose to Purdue. But yeah, I was honestly surprised to see NC State get there. They're obviously a very solid team, but I didn't think they'd beat Marquette. I didn't think they'd beat Duke, but they're here now. Maybe they'll beat Purdue. But we can just jump into this Alabama preview. Second time in 2 years we're seeing the Crimson Tide. If you guys remember, out in the Phil Knight Invitational in Oregon early last year, it's 2022, November 2022. We beat Alabama in the, I believe, semifinal round to advance to the championship, where we beat Iowa State. But Alabama ended up as a 1 seed that year and the number 1 overall seed. So they were no slouch. Last year was probably their year. So that's another reason this is kind of surprising, because you expect Alabama to make the Final Four last year as the 1 seed, not as the 4 this year. But the tournament path, I know Andrew kind of started mentioning it. They beat Charleston, the 13 seed, in the first round. The second round, they got Grand Canyon, who beat St. Mary's in the first round. So they had a 13, then a 12. They beat both of them. They had that win against UNC in the Sweet 16, who a lot of people were thinking would make it to the Final Four. And then they beat Clemson, who upset Arizona. I was about to say Alabama. They upset Arizona in the Sweet 16. So they beat Clemson in the Elite Eight. Now they're here. It's just a very solid team. They certainly have their stars, but a lot of solid role players as well. Let's see. They're the third best offense in the country, which if you remember from our last episode, we were one, Illinois two, now Alabama's three. So a lot of high offensive power lately for the Huskies, but Alabama, the 104th, 104 ranked defense. So pretty much the same as Illinois. Illinois was late 80s, early 90s for their defense. So it's pretty much the same makeup, but as we'll get into it, Bama may have some not better players, but different players that play different ways. And it starts with Mark Sears. I mean, this guy, he's kind of reminds me of a mini Jalen Brunson, not mini in size because they're pretty similar stature wise, but he averaged 21 and a half points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, a consensus All American, had 7 threes in that elite eight tongue twister game versus Clemson. He's small, but he can score the rock. He's a little bit of a mismatch for us, I feel like, for at least like defensively, because he's 6'1", 6 foot, I believe. We don't have anyone that small. He almost has to guard Cam Spencer, I feel like, on defense. But he had 8 points against us in that game last year. And what else we got? He had 8 threes in a game against Purdue this year, a game they ended up losing. But he really steps it up against top competition, clearly.
Yeah, and Sears has been around. This is his senior season, a trend we're beginning to see more and more, especially this year. You know, a lot of upperclassmen sticking around. I'm not sure, where the rest of their starting lineup is looking like age-wise, but they're definitely a seasoned team. Grant Nelson obviously stepping up a lot over March, transferred in North Dakota State. So I'm really excited to see Sears and see how he kind of takes on our backcourt at 6'1" and see, maybe we'll put Castle on him, maybe we'll put Newton on him. It would be interesting to see Castle on a smaller guard like that for sure.
I do think we match up with this team within the starting lineup pretty easily. Like I have the starting five in front of me of Pringle, Nelson, Sears, Griffin, and Estrada. But there is one outlier. So I have the box score from the Clemson game up here. You got your starting five, and then you've got Stevenson and Walters, who played. Stevenson had 19 off the bench. He's a 6'11 forward. We don't have someone on the bench doing that, but at the same time, they ran 7 guys, and then Wag, I don't even know how to say either of those names. Wagon, Bout, I don't know his name, but they both played a minute at the very end. So this is just something that we really haven't seen is someone be that dominant off the bench. So that's definitely going to be something that we struggle with, not struggle with, but something to take into account. But I do think that we match up much better with this starting five than we did with Illinois.
Yeah, I agree. And with Stevenson off the bench, I was looking through his stats. That was the game of his life against Clemson. He had 19 points, hit 5 threes at 6'11". I mean, we don't have anyone that can guard a guy that hits 5 threes at 6'11". I mean, Klingon can, but Stevenson's not really a center. He's kind of just like a big dude, if that makes sense. So I don't know. That's kind of a little bit of a mismatch nightmare for us. But he had 9 total points in the first 3 rounds and then had 19. So I'm going to chalk it up as he just stepped it up when it mattered most and had the best game of his career. Could he do it again? Maybe, but I wouldn't count on it. But we mentioned Sears and Matt, you mentioned Grant Nelson. He's the next scariest, I guess, guy for me. You mentioned transferred in from North Dakota State. He's a stretch big. He's a good scorer, 6'10". He's not a true center, but he's the tallest guy in the starting lineup for Bama. He had 24 and 12 in the Sweet 16 game. He had some clutch free throws at the end, had a nice block, which it wouldn't have really mattered, but he just had his best game of his Alabama career in that Sweet 16 game. He was a highly touted transfer in the portal in the offseason, but him and Sears, I feel like, are the two that worry me the most. You have Aaron Estrada, who averages 13 points per game. It's his fourth school in 5 years. He also played at St. Peter's, Oregon, and Hofstra, but he's a really solid player. He was two-time CAA Player of the Year with Hofstra in his 2 years there. He had a triple-double earlier this year against Ole Miss. He's not a crazy three-point threat like a lot of these guys are, but he certainly distributes the ball well. We actually played against him back in his freshman season. He was at St. Peter's. He had 12 points off the bench. So a little familiar. Hurley remembers that. Hurley remembers everything. So he'll have that written down somewhere. But rounding out this starting lineup, Rylan Griffin's a sophomore sharpshooter. I got to stop with these tongue twisters today. Sophomore sharpshooter who shoots 39% from three. He's 50% from three this NCAA tournament. He has 9 games with 4+ threes this year. Not the greatest defender, but holds his own. And he had 6 points against us with a couple of threes in that game out in Oregon last year. And the last starter, most likely, will be Nick Pringle, who's a big man, 6'9". He has no three ball, a little undersized compared to Klingon. Did have a double-double, 16 and 11 against Clemson in the Elite Eight, which was one of his best games in an Alabama uniform. But he's not no rim protection with him. That's a theme with this whole team. He's only blocked more than one shot in a game 6 times this season as really the starting big man. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the starting lineup. You mentioned Stevenson on the bench. They have Sam Walters, a freshman who's a solid shooter that's not going to play too much. The names that gave Andrew some trouble, I'm going to give him a shot here. Mohamed Wagyu. I don't know if it's Wag or Wagyu, but he's a big man, not much of a factor, just a big body to throw down there. And Mohamed and Muhammad we got here. Diabate, who's a forward. He won't probably play, like you mentioned, only the 1 minute, but he's basically a San Diarra in the fact that he's from Queens and went to Putnam Science Academy. I'm pretty sure I overheard Diarra said he knows him like a brother. So that's a cool matchup to see. Let's see. I know I'm doing a lot of talking here, breaking down this roster. We've got one more guy talk about. Latrell Wrightsell Jr., who is a guard who averages 9 points per game. He got injured against Grand Canyon in that round of 32 game. He has not played since, but I'm hearing people say he will be suiting up, or at least trying to suit up for this Final Four. He averaged 9 points, shot over 44% from three. So he's one of those 3-point weapons that could really beat you. He's a little undersized. He's 6'3", as pretty much their 2, maybe even their 3. So they got a very small backcourt. But he's had 5 games with 5 threes. So he's a sneaky guy that could really beat us. But if he even plays, that's the question.
Yeah, and so as we're talking about it, you kind of just realized we're only going 7 deep normally. We are tending to go 8 now with the emergence of Jalen Stewart, which I feel like is a massive deal. Having that big wing defender. Maybe you can consider we go 9 deep if you count Andrew Hurley. So I think we have a little bit of that depth advantage too.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, if Wrightsell plays, they'll be 8. If not, I don't think they're going to go too deep into their bench. They would be 7. But on their bench, they got 6'10" shooter, 6'11" shooter. So it's a weird makeup, but it works for them. It got them to the Final Four. So it should be a very interesting matchup.
And they are majority shooters. If you look at their shot chart from last game, it's pretty abundant what their strategy is. They take layups and threes. So we need to figure out a way. And I feel like Hurley should be able to find out a way to defend this style of offense. It's not entirely common that you see this anymore. You see a lot of, mid-range and post-game in today's college game with all the big men, but it's going to be interesting to see how Hurley kind of adapts to this style, what he decides to do with Donovan Clingan, maybe just stick him in the paint, maybe bring out a little zone. I guess we'll see.
And I mean, just watching that Clemson game was just like so weird because I'd never seen a team like Alabama. I mean, their game plan is just basically to not play defense and then huck up threes. Like I'm looking at the box score right now. They had 20, nope, that's Clemson. 36 3-point attempts in a game. And they made 13 of them. So I mean, that's pretty good. That's a lot better than we did. But they're playing, they revolve around that 3 ball. And if we play up in the space at the top of the key and on the perimeter, we should be fine because that team doesn't play any defense. And the way we move the ball put a really good defensive team like Illinois in a blender. Same thing with San Diego State. So if we just get stops and score, we should be completely fine against this team.
Yeah, you say 36 3-point attempts. That sounds like a lot. Against Purdue back in December in Toronto, they took 46 threes in 40 minutes. They only lost by 6, and they hit 19 of those threes. So that kind of scares me because if a team if you take 46 and you shoot 40%, that's a lot of points put on the board. This is the team that can certainly score the basketball. I have here. They're second in the country in three-pointers made per game at just over 11. North Florida is first with 12. So they're up there for three-pointers per game. Let's see what else we got. Three-point attempts per game. They average 30. So they take a lot of threes. And I've noticed, especially I watched that Clemson game or the second half of it. A lot of their offense is drive and kick out to the corner or the wing. I saw Estrada was doing that a lot. But the thing is, they're doing that against a Clemson team that doesn't really have a great rim protector. So I don't know. I mean, we have a guy, Donovan Clingan, who is really going to limit what they can get inside. So I feel like the game plan defensively should be stay home if you're guarding the guys in the perimeter in the corner. Don't cheat middle, because if you have a guy like Estrada or Sears driving in looking to kick out, if you don't give them the option to kick, what are they going to do? Shoot it over Clingan? So I feel like putting them in those positions are really, really going to be beneficial. So defensively, just limit the three balls, and because they're not going to get much inside with Donovan and Sampson in there.
Yeah, and hopefully, they go after Illinois' strategy, which seemed to work really well, of just going at Donovan Clingan, just trying to score on him over and over and over and over, and not succeeding. That was a really good strategy by Illinois. And I think that if Alabama follows that strategy of trying to score on the best defensive player in the whole country, then I'm sure they'll find some great success.
Yeah, that was a very interesting quote that Brad Underwood had. I mean, I thought it would happen at some point. They'd break through. No, it was never going to happen. He only was credited with 5 blocks, and I saw a couple of clips of people posted online of shots that he altered that were not called blocks, and he should have had at least 7. He's been unreal defensively. He has been all year, but I feel like he's really taken a step up in this NCAA tournament. Look back at that Northwestern game. He had, I think, 14, 14, and 8, if I'm not mistaken. That's his stat line. He's just been really taking his play to the next level.
Forgot what I was going to say.
No worries. We can move on here. Let's see. Well, we can go to players to watch, I think, for this game. Either you guys want to kick us off?
I'll start it. I feel like I normally do, so I'll take it. There's 2 guys I'm kind of going with. It's either Castle or Clingan. Castle for entirely opposite reasons. I just think Castle on Sears would be generational watch. I feel like that would be really good. I would thoroughly enjoy that, just because Sears like that mini Brunson. Castle kind of like reminds me of a little bit of a SGA, so maybe a little rematch of that Knicks Thunder matchup from MSG. But Clingan, on the other hand, I feel like he might have a really good game once again. Maybe another 2010 performance, another player of the game type performance. Put up another 4 blocks. Alabama likes to get in the paint, so one of those 2 for opposite reasons. Castle on defense and Clingan on offense.
I was actually going to go with a defensive and offensive. And I was going to go with both Clingan and Castle on defense. But for offense, honestly, I'm going to go with Newton, because I think he's had a little bit of a, I wouldn't, it's really hard to describe. Like, he hasn't been like his dominant self really in the tournament. He's had like quiet performances, but he hasn't obviously been terrible. But I'm taking this as his breakout game. He's gonna have over 20, I think, and hope. But honestly, I have a game plan to watch, and it's stop jacking up the threes if they're not going in. Just get stops and get 2s. We'll beat them if we do that. I hate looking at like a 0 for 9, 0 for 10 from 3, and DR being the first one to hit a 3. It's upsetting, honestly.
I was going to go right into that point after my player to watch, which is Hassan Diarra, who's really stepped it up in the 2 games in Boston, using double figures in both of them. You mentioned that 3. It was our only 3 of the first half. We had started 0 for 9 or 0 for 10, so it was a massive at the time, especially it was a close game, so him hitting that 3 was big. He had 7 points in the first half, finished with 11. His impact off the bench as the 6th man has been really unmatched. I mean, Sampson provides what he provides in Donovan Clingan's absence, but having a guard that can provide those type of minutes, that type of defense is huge, especially in this game, because Diarra, when he's in the game, he's going to be on Mark Sears. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it when he's in the game. It also allows Castle to guard someone, maybe not more his size, but someone easier for him. This DR on Sears is the perfect matchup for me, though I'm going with that as my player to watch. I also feel like he can get maybe a 3 or 2, maybe not doubles again. I'll take if you get 8 points out of Hassan DR, we're in a really, really good place. And like I said, I was going to talk about the 3-point shooting, which has been really bad. I'm not even going to say not good. It's been bad so far in the tournament. 28%, I think, or something, which would be fourth worst in the country if we shot like that all season long. But I'm not too like concerned about it just because we're in the Final Four and perhaps the most dominant fashion ever through our first 4 tournament games. So if we can win like that without making any threes, essentially, I mean, I'm scared to see what our ceiling could be if we get hot against an Alabama, a team we might have to get hot against. I know we thought against Illinois it'd be a track meet, a shootout, which it was for us. For them, they hit a brick wall, but I don't know. I'm not too worried about 3-point shooting because we've gotten this far, even with the struggles, but maybe it'll catch up to us.
And that's what I was going to talk about. Against a team like Alabama, like it's honestly, it's bound for, I'm not going to say another 30-0 run is going to happen, but it's bound for something like that to happen. Even if it's not like an maybe it's a 22-6 or a 22-8 run. Still, that's bound to happen against a team like Alabama who lives and dies by the three. So if they're not making threes and then we're scoring on them, that's what's honestly how I think this game is going to go. It'll be close at first, but I think that's how the game's going to go. And then for the guys who are on Alabama Twitter who posted that Donovan Clingan is going to be gassed after one run up the court, and tell me you haven't watched the UConn game without actually telling me that, because he is a fantastic athlete. But Samson Johnson is also going to go in and shut down whoever you have at center, Chipman or whoever else is at center. So Clingan, like, he logged how many? 22 minutes last game because it was a blowout. He can go 25, 27, 28. So that's just not true. But either way, Samson Johnson, be ready to meet him because I guarantee you don't know who he is, Alabama fans.
And I personally feel like the players in this game, obviously, they're the product on the court, but this is going to be a game of chess between the two head coaches. Obviously, Alabama love to run a very different style of offense, one that you never really see. Hurley, as a coach this year, has progressed, not just this year, through last year and this year, has progressed beyond the imagination. He's become one of the best coaches in the sport of college basketball. So I am very curious to see how he kind of counters this unique offense of Alabama and how he kind of takes his players and puts them in the right positions and ultimately comes out with a W.
Yeah, I feel like the team that's most similar offensively to what Alabama does is Creighton. I feel like the Blue Jays were a big perimeter-oriented team with Ashworth, Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander, but they don't run as often as Alabama does. I have up here they're ninth in tempo in the country, which is very, very high for those of you who don't understand the stat. We're number 315, which isn't great, but I feel like that's kind of a skewed stat. I feel there's no way we play that slow. And we play slow because we take our time. We run when we can and when we have to, but we also take our time and run good sets to get guys open. So that's why that number is so low. But I saw that on Twitter earlier today. An Alabama fan account posted like the comparisons, which the only thing Alabama had us on was tempo and strength of schedule. All the actual basketball things didn't matter. But one fan, I lost the tweet. Hold up. One fan commented underneath that post. He said, the stat to look at here is tempo. Bama 9, UConn 315. If when Bama runs up and down the court, UConn stamina will be tested. They aren't used to running like Bama will make them run. And I mean, that guy's clearly not watched us play all year. He makes it sound like we're a bunch of out of shape guys, but we run a lot. Castle, Newton, Diarra. I mean, we don't do it all the time if you don't have to. But I just like looking at funny stuff like that. People who think they know what they're talking about and really have no idea. It's just funny to see.
And tempo is definitely more offensive. Sorry, Andrew. I didn't mean I
No,
didn't
you're
mean
good. Keep going.
I was gonna say tempo is way more of an offensive based stat than defensive. And I mean, if you haven't watched a UConn game, It's a very complex style of gameplay. We take our time on offense, like Connor said. We're in no rush to score. We'll take up 15 to 20 seconds of that shot clock. Hurley's drawing up plays that I've never even thought of: fake screens, fake cuts, you know, players curling back, a lot of caravan curling. But if you watch UConn games, you'll see that players like Donovan Clingan are moving on defense because he knows that he needs to get back in the paint. If you there's a clip on social media of Hurley talking about, how to build a successful championship program, and he was mentioning guys like Sonogo, like Jackson, like Hawkins. He was saying that they ran everywhere. He's like, Hawkins ran everywhere, Sonogo ran everywhere. So he definitely preaches this cardio and this, sort of tempo. It's just defensive tempo. We're there on defense, but on offense, we're gonna play at our pace, and no team has been able to stop us from playing at our pace all year.
And you simply can't tell how athletic a team is by looking at a sheet. You can't. If you haven't watched us play, you just can't comment on how athletic we are. And yeah, like Matt said, there is that clip of our players running up and down the seats at Campbell, and then like you said, like we run a set offense. I saw a video today, of like Nate Oates having a thing where they just run up and down the floor and just take layups. Yeah, that's gonna work great until you realize that you have to kick it out and all your players, because all you have them do is run up the court. They're in the same line as you throw it away. So it's just, I hate people who try to like I look at Ken Palm, just to see, but you can't tell how athletic a team is by looking at a sheet of paper. Like you can't. You got to watch a game, and they're in for a rude awakening if they think we're unathletic.
Yeah, that clip of Alabama you're mentioning, I just pulled it up now. I was going to mention it. I would show it on this, but I don't know the rules with the copyright and stuff. I'm not going to risk anything, but it's just them going back and forth, just passing the ball, getting a layup, and then going back down the court, doing the same thing over and over. And all the comments are like, we did this in middle school. And Alabama fans are trying to flex this, like, get ready to run track, UConn, or they don't know what's coming. This is stuff you do when you're 11 years old. So I don't know. Maybe we're digging too deep into this, but I'm not afraid of them even if they run, because we can certainly run right back. There's a couple more things and then we'll wrap up here. Bit of a longer-ish episode. Final Four preview. It has to be. We'll touch upon that second matchup. Not going to go too deep into it because we're a UConn podcast, but Purdue, NC State. I mean, right away, you'd think Purdue is going to take that one, but NC State, they feel like that team of destiny. DJ Burns is really taking the hearts of America. There's always one player every year that makes a deep run like that really becomes the fan favorite. They have some solid shooters around him. It's just a solid team that wouldn't have been here if they didn't win 5 games in 5 days like UConn and Kemba did back in 2011. They're now the second team to do that after Kemba. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like Purdue should fairly easily take that game. I could be wrong. I've been wrong the past 2 times when I said NC State would lose. But I don't know. I just feel like on the big stage, Purdue, they're due for that redemption from last year.
And I feel like no matter what happens in that game between Purdue and NC State, if we come out and beat Alabama, that's going to be a fun game nonetheless, because we're either getting Edey and Clingan, like I mentioned before, or DJ Burns and Clingan, like I mentioned, or I haven't mentioned, but I'm mentioning now. That game's going to be a lot of fun. Burns isn't going to be able to get away with a lot of what he's been getting away with throughout the tournament. He's not going to be able to bully these guys inside. He's not going to be able to push Edey all the way down to the paint and hit an easy hook shot over him. Edey's gonna, hold his own. And I feel like, whoever comes out of that matchup might be a little bit beat up. So I think we're on the right side of things here. We're definitely on the right side of the bracket, ending up playing Alabama. As if we beat them, we're not going to be very beat. Maybe we'll be a little tired, but it won't be compared to whatever is going to happen in the paint with DJ Burns and Zach Edey.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see us play both of these teams. Honestly, I feel like it'd be a fun matchup either way. But part of me, even though it'd be the harder game, I really want to see UConn Purdue. We've wanted to see that for the past couple of years. I know you mentioned Klingon versus Edey, but even like our guards versus their guards, Braden Smith has stepped it up this year as a sophomore, Fletcher Lawyer as well. It would be a great matchup. It'd be up there with one of the best championship games of all time. I feel like no matter what winner, whoever wins, whoever loses, It's pretty much that Gonzaga Baylor. Like I said earlier in the episode, it's the clear cut best two teams in the country going at it in the championship, which is not saying that's what it should be, but that might be what it should be. But yeah, it should be a fun game. I'm happy that it's the first game and not the second game because imagine a world where we lose to Alabama in that first game. You can't enjoy that second game. You can't even watch that second game. But last year we were the second game as well, and there was an instant classic SDSU with the buzzer beater against FAU. So maybe we'll see something magical like that again. But it's just cool to be that second game and be able to watch that first game. Sure, you're a little stressed because your team plays a Final Four game in like 30 minutes, 40 minutes after it ends, but you could still enjoy some great basketball. I think pretty much it. I want to shout out UConn women back in the Final Four as well. I know they had a bit of a tough game last night against USC, then one seed they pulled it out in the end. I believe I saw this. It's either the fifth or seventh time. I think the fifth time we've been in the Final Four at the same time. Obviously, every year that ends in a four and starts with a two that there's been basketball, we have both won a national championship. Is that going to continue this year? It's going to be tough for the women, not going to lie. Iowa and then probably South Carolina. But I don't know. It's just really cool to see us both back in the Final Four. Also, NC State, both their programs in the Final Four. Cool to see that. But it's been long overdue for both of us to be back there at the same time.
You're right. It is the fifth time. 04, 9, 11, 14, and now 24. But just like what this team went through, I mean, with AZ Fudd going out in the beginning of the season, Jean Alfie tearing her Achilles before the season even started, and then Caroline Ducharme being out, as well as Ayanna Patterson. And then I'm missing one. Aubrey Griffin going down mid-season. Like they beat all odds. You know, once Aubrey went down, the fifth one, everybody was saying, oh, nope, they're done. Gino's going to quit. He can't do this anymore. They got to the Final Four with 7 players and 2 freshmen in the starting lineup, KK Arnold and Ashlyn Shade, and then Caden Samuels off the bench. So it's awesome. Like I love that team. They're really fun to watch every year. But honestly, I'm just happy for Gino because he had a thing going on about last year, how they're saying, oh, it's the players he had, this and that, blah blah blah. He just got to the Final Four with 7 players. Give him his flowers. But I'm really happy to see both schools succeeding in this year's tournament. Even if it is the Final Four is the last stop for the women, just making the Final Four is a miracle, and I'm really happy to see it.
Yeah, unfortunately for them, they have to run into the wrecking ball of Caitlin Clark here in the Final Four, which will definitely be a lot of fun. These games are pulling in some numbers. I'm not gonna lie. That whole rivalry, that game that happened last night or 2 nights ago, if you're watching this the day it's posted, between LSU and Iowa, those games are instant classics. Those games are pulling in crazy numbers, and it's really awesome to see. Back in the day, college basketball, we had Magic and Bird. So who knows? Maybe we're looking at a bit of a revolution here in women's basketball with Clark and Reese and Beckers and Watkins, all these big names that are just blowing up the sport.
Yeah, I agree. I won't lie, I haven't watched too much women's basketball. I follow the Huskies and see every game and how they destroy the Big East. I haven't watched too much of them, but I watched both games of that doubleheader. That was probably it's gonna be tough for any men's doubleheader to top what that was last night. I don't think the Final Four for the men will. Maybe it will, but I don't know. That was just great, especially because UConn won. I probably would have rather than played LSU, but Iowa, they're beatable. Who knows? Maybe not. But all in all, good to see both Huskies programs back in the Final Four where they should be. This is not going to be the last time we're both here at the same time, and it's not going to take another 10 years like it did since the last occurrence. You can pretty much guarantee that. I think now that'll just about do it here for our Final Four preview, unless you guys got any last remarks. No, I think we're good then. This was a blast. I know we're getting a little greedy doing these every year, previewing the Final Four. Hopefully we do it every year, but I don't know if we'll be that lucky. But I mean, it'd be nice if the next episode you guys see is on Sunday or Monday, us previewing the national championship. That would certainly be an ideal situation, but even if not, it was a really fun ride to get to the Final Four. But we're not settling. We're gonna play our best. We're gonna win that sixth national championship, but got to start with beating Alabama on Saturday. So yeah, hopefully that next episode, episode 74, will be the national championship preview. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.